Hello, and welcome to another episode of Spectacular Science here at Pueblo Library. Today's show is brought to you by Nature's Educators. Nature's Educators was founded in 2008 and is located in Sedalia, Colorado. It was established to bring animals into nature centers, classrooms, events, and more to teach about wildlife and help to create a healthy respect and understanding of all animals. Today's program, presented by Kalia, is all about animals of the wizarding world. So, if you ever wondered, can an owl really carry your mail? Can a cat sniff out a wizard in disguise? You'll learn all this and all about the real animals of the wizarding world, toads, cats, snakes, and more, who act as familiars and magical pets, and what they really can and cannot do. And don't forget to pick up a kit from the library to make some cool animal crafts of your own. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Kalia from Nature's Educators.
Hi, my name is Kalia. Nature's Educators is a 501c3 nonprofit, and we are licensed by the United States Department of Agriculture and the United States Fish and Wildlife Service to care for various types of animals. So some of these animals that I'm going to talk about today are animals that you can have as a pet, and others not so much. So and that's kind of one of the things that's fun to talk about with Harry Potter. Because they show a lot of different animals as pets, but a lot of those animals are not necessarily good pets, or in some cases, it's actually illegal to have some of those animals as pets. So, when you go to Hogwarts, you get your letter. Your letter tells you that you can have one of 3 animals as a pet. So it says when you go to school, you can take a toad, a cat, or an owl. So in real life, the only one of those that's a really good pet is a cat. Cats are amazing pets. They are a type of animal that we are calling a domestic animal. That means they've been in human care for thousands of years, and they no longer know how to take care of themselves. So cats, they rely on us to do all sorts of things for them, like give them food, water, groom them, make sure that they're safe from things like predators. They can't do that themselves anymore. Whereas the other animals, so we're going to actually meet one of those animals, and we'll talk about why even though you could have one as a pet, it's not always the best pet. So let's see here. Oh, he's kind of hoppy. Ooh. Yeah, so this guy is a toad, and the species of this toad is called a woodhouse toad. So these are a Colorado native. They live all over in eastern Colorado. So we see these guys on the plains, and they are usually coming out at night, so they are a nocturnal animal. We don't always see them for that reason, but they're around. Oh. He's very hoppy. Gonna put him back in his box here for a second. Can't really see him in here as well, but it's a little better for him to hang out in this box so he can't, hopefully he won't jump out of here. But these toads are out here eating things like bugs. They're eating little mice. They can eat fish, all sorts of little things like that. So these guys... So we'll talk about why they don't make great pets. So you could have one of these guys as a pet. They are legal here in Colorado. So one of the reasons toads aren't our best pets are because of these bumps on the back of his head. So this bump here and this bump right here, those are poison glands. So this animal is poisonous. So we have to be really careful with these guys. So because I've touched this toad, I need to go and wash my hands after this because I don't want to accidentally eat his poison. Now, this poison isn't deadly. Some toads potentially are, though. So you kind of have to know what kind of toad you're dealing with at all, if you're going to get one as a pet. Because if you have one with a potentially deadly poison, you definitely do not want to be touching that. This poison, it tastes real bad. It'll... make your gums itch and water. So it's not fun to get the poison in you, but it's not going to hurt you. So the other reason these guys aren't the best pets is they really don't like to be pet. These are kind of a more hands-off type animal. He just sort of likes to do his own thing, which is right now hopping around his box. And they'll dig. So a lot of times these guys will dig underground and just sort of sit in the dirt, and we won't really see them do very much. Now, if you want a hands-off pet, one that you will sit in a container, you just feed and clean, then a toad actually is a good animal to have around. And then the other thing, another reason we don't pet him too much is he's covered in slime. And this will be true for all frogs, toads, and salamanders. Their bodies have a slimy coating, that's mucus, that covers their bodies. And that helps their bodies stay wet. So this animal is always at risk of drying out. And if he were to dry out, he actually wouldn't be able to breathe because toads breathe through their skin. So that's another reason that we don't pet him too much, because if I sat there and held him and touched him all the time, I would eventually wipe away his slimy coating. And if he didn't have enough time to replenish that mucus coating, he could get sick. He could stop being able to breathe as well. So he is definitely an animal that I am not going to touch very much. They are kind of fun little critters. And what's really cool is that the way they eat. So they use their tongues to capture their food. It's only about that long. So sometimes you'll see in the cartoons, the frogs and toads have their really long tongues. They can shoot out to catch a fly. He's not really eating flies because they're usually flying too high above him. He's catching the little animals, little bugs that walk right in front of him on the ground. So think more of like a grasshopper walking in front of him, or maybe a cockroach is what he would be looking for as food-wise. And then what he'll do is, because he doesn't have muscles in his throat to push the food down, he's actually going to swallow with his eyeballs. So when you watch a frog or toad swallow their food, you'll see their eyeballs, they sink down into his skull. And they're actually going to push the food down into his stomach. So they have a really unique way of actually eating their food. And then, yeah, let's get one last good look at this little critter before we put him away. So you might be able to hear him making some little tiny chirps. And that's actually how I know this is a male toad. So only the males make sound. In spring, we'll hear them calling, making sound to call the female toads. And the female toads will actually be silent. They're not calling for a mate. They're just listening to hear where the male is. So she doesn't need to be noisy. And the noise can attract a predator, so it's actually better for her to be silent. It'll keep her hidden a little better from those predators. That male, when he's calling and making noise all the time, sometimes the predators hear him and know where that male toad is. And that toad's name is Funfetti. So our next animal that we're going to talk about, in both Harry Potter and real life, sort of gets a bad rap. In Harry Potter, they are associated with a lot of the bad guys, which isn't really fair to the animal, because they're actually really cool. And they are definitely not bad. And really, we like to say that there's no such thing as a bad animal. They are just doing what they are meant to do. Sometimes we as humans may not like it, but they're just surviving, doing the best that they can to keep themselves alive. So this critter is a snake, and this is a boa constrictor. So this is the snake in the first book that Harry accidentally lets out of the zoo. Now, if you watch the movie, you might notice that this is not what that snake looks like in the movie. So for the movie, they actually used a python because pythons can get a lot larger. Boa constrictors will get to be about 8 to 10 feet. And for the movie, they just wanted to show a giant snake. So they used a Burmese python, and those guys can get up to be about 15 feet long. So snakes, like I said, are often associated with, the bad guys in Harry Potter. But they really are a good animal. And because of what these guys eat. So a snake can eat lots of mice, rats, rabbits, all sorts of small little mammals. And this is good because it keeps those animals from becoming overpopulated. And especially in areas like Colorado, we want these guys around because things like mice can carry diseases that could spread to humans. So by having lots of snakes around, we actually keep ourselves safer because snakes actually cannot transmit any diseases to people. Now, one of the reasons some people don't like snakes is because they're worried that they're going to get bit by a snake. That is a thing we can be concerned about. But we have to remember that no snake in the world wants to bite us. There's not a snake that's going to wake up and be like, yep, I'm going to go find some humans and bite them today. They don't think like that. So typically, if a snake is going to bite a human, it's for one of two reasons. So one reason would be if you smelled like snake food. So if I went and pet a rat and then went and picked up our boa constrictor, he would smell that food on me and he might bite me. And that's because he has really poor vision. He can't really see well. So when he smells, and he's going to do that with his tongue, which you might see sticking out here. When he smells something on that tongue, he just reacts to it. So if he smells rat, he's going to bite it. Once he realizes, like, oh, I just bit something huge that I can't eat, he would let go. The other reason, and this is why most people would get bit by a snake, is if you scare a snake. So a snake in the wild looks at humans as a predator. We are a big animal, and they don't know that we're not going to eat them. So they just assume that anything large is dangerous to them. So sometimes if we get too close to a snake, if we startle them, they will bite us. So we just need to kind of be careful when we're working in areas where there are snakes, which is most of the state. Now, we are lucky here in Colorado. We only have 3 venomous snakes, and all 3 are rattlesnake species. That means that they are easy to identify, and they will warn us when they are in the area. So if they notice us, they'll rattle at us, and we can know to walk away from them. That's kind of the other cool thing about most snakes. Most snakes will not chase you because they see you as a predator. They just want you to go away. So once you go away, they're going to feel safer and they'll leave you alone. And they're also pretty slow animals. The fastest snake in the world is a sidewinder. It can go about 18 miles an hour. The next fastest can only go 13 miles an hour. And even our rattlesnakes and bull snakes here in Colorado are slower than that. So we don't really need to worry about needing to run from a snake. We can pretty much just walk away from them. Now, this snake, he is not venomous. As you might guess from the name boa constrictor, he's a constrictor snake. So you can kind of see he's not constricting me right now, but he is wrapped around my arm. So he's just holding on to me. I am like a tree branch for this snake. So he's holding on. And in the wild, he would climb trees to look for prey. Although once he is full grown at 8 to 10 feet, he will spend most of his time on the ground. Because at that size, he's going to be pretty large. He's not going to want to spend that energy going into the trees. But at this size, he's a lot lighter. He's only about maybe 4 feet long right now. But he will wrap around. Now, it is hard to see exactly how long a snake is because they never really straighten out. They're always going to have some curves in them because they're constantly on the move. Now, this snake, like most snakes, can eat something as big around as the largest part of his body. So this snake can eat something about this big around, which is pretty impressive when we consider they do it in one bite. So if you look at this wide part of his body here, and then look at the size of his head, it's a pretty big difference in size. So he's eating everything in one bite. So this snake, once he's caught his prey, he's going to unhinge his jaw in the back. So right back here, where we have a lot of muscle that attaches our jaw to the top of our skull, he actually just has really stretchy skin. So we can drop it down in the back. And then right here, he's got two bones. These are two separate bones. Unlike us, we have, this is kind of one solid piece. He can open it up really wide in the front. And then he can swallow that prey whole. And you can see it going down. So if he's eating a rat, you can actually see the lump as it goes down his body and into his stomach. And snakes do have stomachs and all of the same body parts as other animals. They're just very long and kind of stretched throughout his body. So some snakes will have some other things they can use to find food besides just their sense of smell. So some snakes will use their jawbone. So their jaw, because a lot of times it's laying on the ground, especially in some of these large snakes who lay on the ground to wait for food. He'll feel vibrations through his jawbone. He doesn't have ears, so he can't really hear things coming. But because sound is a vibration, he can feel sounds or just heavy like footsteps coming towards him in his jawbone. So his jawbone is very sensitive. So he can detect prey or possibly danger that way. And then some snakes, like pythons and rattlesnakes, they also have the ability to sense heat. So they will detect where a warm surface is or a warm prey, like a mouse. So because things like mice and rabbits are warm-blooded, they're typically a little bit warmer than their environment. That makes it really easy for snakes to that can sense heat to figure out where they are and find them. Yeah. All right. I'm going to see I'll unwrap our little snake friend here. So he likes to wrap around and hold. So he's got really strong muscles that help him do that. And he's just got muscles all down his body. So we're going to put him away. So this snake's name is Jamie. And he is still pretty young. He is not full grown yet. And as a male, we would expect that snake to get maybe 8 feet long. Maybe a little less if he's going to be a smaller snake. And we just won't know how big he's going to get until we finally see that he's stopped growing. So our last animal in Harry Potter we're going to talk about today, is one that in Harry Potter is a pet. In real life, they are not. And in the United States, it's actually illegal to keep this animal as a pet. It's even illegal to keep a part of this animal. Even if you just found it, you wouldn't be able to keep it. So he is what we'll call, is considered a wild animal. So even though toads and snakes are wild, you can keep them, certain species as pets. This guy is a wild animal, and you could not keep this as a pet. Alrighty. Yep. So this is a barn owl. So like I said, in Harry Potter, owls are pets. And a lot of the wizards use these guys as messengers. In real life, even if you could keep them, you could never use one of these animals to deliver a message. They're actually not that smart. So these animals are built for hunting and finding prey. So something like, finding a person, they can't really tell one person apart from the other. And they just wouldn't care. What he wants to do is this barn owl would want to go out and hunt some mice. So a barn owl can hunt and eat about 6 mice a night. So they're actually really good at controlling pest populations. So it's a good owl to have in the wild. And then these guys, like I said, their brains are pretty small little brains. And one of the reasons for that is their eyes take up most of the room in their skull. So his eyes are so large, they actually touch each other and the back of his skull. And this is what helps him to have that really good night vision. And so he can see at night. But because of that, he just has a much smaller brain. But he has things that help him make up for that. So not every animal is going to be smart, but usually there's something else that will help them make up for that. So in owls, we see that they are incredibly strong animals. They'll use their talons to grip and grab prey. They also have a really cool ability to locate their prey. So they actually have an ear that's up high on one side and an ear down low on the other. And this helps them listen to their prey, and the sound reaches their ears at different times. And then they can determine exactly where that sound is coming from. So if you look at our barn owl's face, you can kind of see that there is an obvious ring of feathers around his face. If you'll ever look back at the camera. There you go, buddy. And that's called a facial disc. So all owls have a facial disc. The barn owl has a really obvious one. And it's kind of, we say it's a heart-shaped facial disc, whereas other owls have more of a round-shaped facial disc. But that disc works like a big satellite dish to push sound into his ears. So it works actually similar to the outer ear shell that mammals have. Because most birds just have their ear under their feathers. But these guys, they are relying on that hearing to find their prey. And then they just swoop down and they can grab it. And when they fly silently. So sometimes you might be outside at night and you'll see the shadow of an owl swooping down over you. But you won't actually hear it. So it can be a little spooky because of that. So these guys will come silently, grab their prey, and their prey usually has no idea that the owl is even there because they are so quiet. So yeah, these guys are just amazing hunters, relying on their instincts to tell them where their food is, and then they'll use their built-in stealth to just sneak up on it. So one of the reasons they are very silent is that on this edge of his wing, he has what are called the flutings. These are an eyelash-looking structure there, and they kind of wiggle back and forth as the owl flies to break up sound. And the other thing that is helping is that owls actually do have very soft feathers compared to other birds, and those soft feathers help absorb sound. And you are focused on something behind us. All right. So this owl, was bred in captivity to become an education bird. So even though you can't have him as a pet, people do breed them for groups like us, as well as places like zoos, because owls that are raised in captivity with humans do a lot better seeing humans every single day. Because once these guys get used to living life in the wild, a lot of times they just don't want to adapt to captivity. So we typically use owls that were raised by people. Doesn't mean he's going to be any smarter, though, or able to do any of the cool things they can do in Harry Potter. Now, there is one bird who can do some of those things. So the only bird that we know of in the world that could deliver a message is a pigeon. And so those common city pigeons that we see around, they actually do have the ability to deliver messages. And they actually are fairly smart animals. But what they're doing actually is also based on instinct. So they know where home is, and their instinct is to always fly home. So it's a one-way messaging system, not like in Harry Potter where you can be like, Hedwig, go deliver this letter to Hagrid. you would have to take a pigeon from Hagrid's hut, and then from the school, you could then send your pigeon out back to Hagrid, and Hagrid would get the message. And that's about the only way to send a message with birds. No, he just pooped. That's actually another reason these guys should not be pets. They are very messy. They poop every 10 minutes. It can be very stinky. And they are also very destructive. So they have their sharp talons that they're using to grab prey. A little sound from him. So they're grabbing their prey with their talons, and they're just perching on things too. So if you just have one in your house and he gets on your couch, he's going to tear that up, even without meaning to. So this is worse than just a cat. At least the cats usually keep their claws in. He can't do that. So he's going to just perch on things. They're going to get shredded. And sometimes they just do that for fun. It's their entertainment is to rip things apart. You also would have to keep a freezer full of frozen mice for these guys. That's what we have here at Nature's Educators, is a freezer full of dead frozen mice, which most people don't want to keep. So like I said, he's eating 6 mice a night. That's a lot of mice that you're going to go through to care for one of these guys. And you can't leave them in a cage. So here he has a large enclosure that he can fly in, because he needs a chance to fly around, to move, perch and look at new things. So he's got a big window he gets to look out of. So all of that just makes these guys not acceptable as pets. And like I said, in the United States, it would be illegal. You cannot keep these birds without a license, which is what U.S. Fish and Wildlife licenses us to do, is to keep this bird in captivity. And you can't just go out and get a license. So typically in the United States, it's you're going to have to be an educator, so like a zoo or our organization, to have these guys. They are really cool animals, but very messy. They can be very hard to take care of, but they are cool to watch and see. And you might have heard his little screech that he made earlier. Sometimes he does it just if he thinks a hand's coming too close to him. So even though this bird was raised in captivity, he doesn't like to be pet or touched in any way. Owls are solitary creatures. So in the wild, they would not be hanging out with a lot of other owls. They would have their mate when they're raising babies, and that's it. When they're not raising babies, they want to be on their own. So sometimes this bird, when he sees a hand, he will screech at it. So that was him telling me, don't you dare touch me. I don't want you to put your hand on me, because he does not like to be touched. And that screech is a pretty quiet screech. These guys can actually do a much louder, much higher pitched screech. It sounds almost like nails on a chalkboard. It is a horrendous sound, and it's actually very spooky. If you didn't know that an owl was making that sound, you might think it was a ghost or some kind of monster. And it's actually believed that there are some legends and ghost stories that were started because of owls. People couldn't see the owl at first, and they just heard this horribly loud sound. And then maybe they saw this really white shape coming overhead. And then they're like, oh, it's a ghost. And because these owls do hang out in old abandoned barns, you go into the barn, hear the sound, see the shape, and you're just like, there's a ghost in there. And if you're not certain what that is, a lot of people just don't want to stick around to be like, I wonder what that was. Just because it sounds big and dangerous. Now, these guys can't really hurt you too badly if you were to hang around the barn where one was living. Although I would advise that if you know an owl is nesting in an area, to give them plenty of space. Because that means if they're nesting, they want some privacy to have their babies so they feel safe to do that. So that was our last critter. I'm going to go ahead and put him away. So his name is Comet, and he's about 3 years old. All right. And that is all 3 animals that we have to talk about today. So there are a lot more in Harry Potter, but we're just going to do those 3 for today. So yeah, that's all we've got for you. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you for that fascinating stuff. Those are really great animals, and I love that he screeched, that we got to hear that stuff. And you taught me so much today, so I'm sure all the kids out there watching learned even more. And thank you so much for joining us. And for those of you who are viewing, you can see this video on Facebook and YouTube, and they'll be up there for quite a while. So if you didn't get a chance to see the whole thing, make sure you check those out. And don't forget to get a kit at the library, too, to go along with this program. So thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Goodbye.